Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Disruptive Minds. Today I'm joined by Damon Lembi of Learnit, and we're going to be talking a little bit about why education is so important and why being a lifetime learner can help you get ahead in both your career and life. You are listening to the Disruptive Minds podcast, home of the entrepreneur. Hi, Damon. Thanks for joining us.
Bill, it's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk about lifelong learning because I think it's one of the most underrated things that people do, right? Because whether you realize it or not, your entire life you're learning, you're taking in new information, and it's a lifelong process. It doesn't just stop at high school or college. And it's a really understated part of development.
Yeah, I agree with that. And hopefully you continue to learn. There are a lot of people out there who they think they get to a certain level and that they know it all and have it all figured out. But I mean, I can only speak for myself, but that's definitely hasn't been the case.
One of the reasons I want to talk to you is you guys are all about learning, right? You work with a diverse number of industries, diverse amount of topics, and it really seems like regardless of what you do, you can be a lifelong learner, right? What do you think is so important about continuing to learn and continuing to grow as a person?
So I believe that all of us can continue to learn and grow and evolve throughout our lives. It all comes down to how interested and passionate you are about something. Now, sure, some people are more talented than others in certain areas, so maybe they might learn faster. But if you dig in on something, you can continue to learn and grow. And why it's so important, I think now more than ever, obviously, is the rapid pace of change. With AI and everything that's happening, the skills that you have today are most likely not going to be the skills that you need in 6 months and definitely not 3 years from now. So one of the most important things out there is learning agility, your ability to continue to learn and sometimes unlearn, relearn, and grow.
Yeah, AI is a really big one when it comes to this, and it's the buzzword right now. AI, is like the poster child for this right now. But there's all kinds of skills that we've learned as time gone on, right? Like every day, companies are introducing new software. There's new solutions, and the thought leadership on a lot of different topics changes over time, and it's really important to keep up with that stuff.
Yeah, it's absolutely important. And if you look at it, a lot of the skills that we have today, even if you're a programmer and you know Python or Excel, most of that is going to be automated. And the skills I really believe that are going to be important in the future are the human skills, whether it's creative problem solving, being empathetic, human decision making. And those skills, I don't believe in our lifetime are ever going to go away.
Yeah, one of the things I like to say is that the people that are the most valuable in the workforce and in the things they do are the people that combine both art and science, right? So those people that can take a technology or take a workflow or take that equation, actually apply it in a meaningful way, right? Because anybody can use a calculator, anybody can use AI, anybody can use these tools. But the people who can apply it with tact, they can incorporate that degree of artistry into their craft. Those are the people that excel the most, right? And you see that more and more every day, right? Like when you go to the store, you buy things based on the packaging, right? A lot of people do it. It's not just about having the best technology, understanding how to use the things, but understanding how to bring those human elements into the use of those technologies and those skills.
I think you bring up a good point about art and science. Some of the best sales reps we've ever hired have liberal arts backgrounds, so it's completely different than what they went to school for, but they think creatively, they think differently, and they're able to apply that in a field like sales. Now, when it comes to AI, yes, I mean, we could all use it, but I think it's important how we use it. And I think it should be used as a thought partner. You should never, whether you're doing research or writing an email, something simple like an email, you can't just trust ChatGPT or Claude to get it perfect. And the output you're going to get, I find, and I'm by no means a super technical person, but I'm really fascinated on getting better with AI and learning, is how you think critically and the questions you ask it, and how you get it to challenge, and you challenge AI to challenge you. And when you're able to do that, I think it's a great thought partner. And I use it to debate myself all the time. And even use it to build comp plans for our sales team. I'll throw it into ChatGPT and I'll say, please be a seasoned sales leader and challenge me on this, on the simplicity of this comp plan, and if it's creating the right behaviors. Interview me by asking me with 3 questions, one at a time, and it's crazy what it comes out with.
Well, that's the thing, is a lot of people look at it as just a tool and an instrument, right? They say, rewrite my email, right? But what ChatGPT and a lot of these technologies are really good at doing is interaction. They're built to interact. They're built to have, 3, 4, 5, 6, back and forth. So that's why they put it like a chat, right? It's meant to be repeatedly interacted with, not just a one and done click of the button. I got what I want, put it out there. And I think these soft skills that we have with people can be applied to the technology as well. So you can have a conversation with ChatGPT. You can give it constructive criticism. You can direct it to something, put it on a topic, tell it to write in a mood, right? Write the outline for it and say, hey, fill this in. This is what I'm thinking. Like you said, you can have it push back. You can have it analyze it. Like, where might be the holes in my thought? Where am I lacking insight? If you were a job candidate, where would you have an issue with this proposal, right? So it's a great tool for a lot of things like that. I think a lot of people really stop way too early in terms of their engagement with the technology.
Yeah, and it's kind of, we're on this theme of lifelong learning, and I'll give you a great example around feedback. I have my own podcast, the Learn It All podcast, and what I like to do after every interview is take the transcript, throw it into ChatGPT, and have it really analyze my performance as a host and push on areas where I can get better. And sometimes we'll say, your questions were run on, you should have pushed back more here. And I think it's literally helped me get better and improve that instant feedback that it can give you. But it doesn't, you have to ask it the right questions and think critically, even with how you develop it. But it's such an amazing tool for individuals like you and I who want to get better at certain things. You have it built right in for you.
Yeah. So I see that you guys do a lot of courses and structured things, right? What do you think the real advantage is between like a course and like structured learning versus like something that's more unstructured? Like, we talk about ChatGPT, you got free resources like YouTube. What's the value of really putting structure to that learning?
I think that's a great question, and I'm going to answer it in 2 parts. So the first is, like, on YouTube, you can learn for free on YouTube. I mean, we have a big YouTube channel. We have 900,000 subscribers, but a lot of times you could go to YouTube and you have to sift through a lot of content to figure out if anything's any good or not, and then you could be wasting time. Versus structured courses, if you came to learn it, they're all vetted. They're all models that we've built ourselves, and they're definitely interactive and engaging. Yes, they cost money, but at the end of the day, your time is very valuable as well. So you don't want to learn the wrong things and go through free resources that could not have been vetted. But I spend a lot of time learning from YouTube. My wife told me to go grill something on the grill the other day, and I don't know how to do that. So I put, how do I grill hamburgers, right? So I did that. But the other type of learning is in the moment learning, running a team and leading a team. And it's the coaching of the individuals on your team. So yes, I actually think it's great to go to Learnit and send your managers through like a new manager program on how to coach, how to be a better listener, how to have difficult conversations. But I think the real power in learning are these opportunities, Bill, where individuals, a new manager maybe makes a mistake. And so then you coach them through that mistake, because you're learning in the moment and you're connecting that back to a specific concept. Concepts are great, but you need to tie those to the story and real learning examples.
Yeah, I think that takes us back to grade school in a way, right? Remember like the learning styles. I remember that being like a big topic. It's like, are you a verbal learner? Are you a sight learner? Are you a hands-on learner? And one of the things I've learned as I've gotten older is that a lot of people, when they're in high school, they raise their hand. I'm a verbal learner, right? But a lot of people are hands-on learners, right? A lot more people than what we, may think on paper, right? So a lot of times doing things, right, having that feedback in real time is really the best way to train, staff, somebody doing any kind of job or function that's really important, because doing it is, a really great way to learn it, right?
Absolutely. I like to say, and I didn't make this up, David Katz, the CEO of Plastic Bank, told me this one, which is one of my favorite lines of the last 2 years. Learning without doing is treason. So you can take all the classes in the world, you can read all the books you want to read, get as many degrees as possible. But at the end of the day, if you're not applying it to anything, what's the use? And I think sometimes people get stuck in reading books and reading and just focusing on concepts because maybe they're afraid to get out of their comfort zone and try things. But I think it's really important to do a combination of both and also come up with your own perspective on how things work. Get mentors, learn from books, learn from taking classes. And like you said, I think we all have our preferred method of learning. I like coaching, to be honest. One-on-one coaching, it really helps me out a lot. I can't make it through watching a video. I love listening to podcasts when I'm out on walks. So you got to find the learning modularity, if that's the right word, for what works best for you. And also at the same time, think about, okay, how am I able to apply what I'm listening to or learning to either my personal or professional life? Because that's where the retention will stick, instead of having all these different concepts in your mind and really not knowing, well, how do I apply this and chasing the shiny object all the time? You got to do something with it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's really, really insightful. I think that's something that a lot of people, they freeze, right? They have this like lack of forward momentum, for, best way I can put it. And what I came up with a while ago is I call it the B plus principle, right? And that is, I'll do something if I think I can get a B plus at it, right? I don't hold myself to that A standard at first. I don't hold myself to A plus, because if I did that, it would fuel inaction. So what I do is I'll learn about something, I'll think about something, I'll brainstorm, I'll do that till I think I have a B plus grasp on something, and then I'll put it into action. And back on that whole topic, one of my favorite things is when I do watch a video or I take a tutorial, I go in with a goal of coming out with one or two actionable things, right? You go sit through a 30-minute, 40-minute lecture, a 2-hour podcast. If you try to walk away with everything that the host says or the guy giving the lecture says, you're wasting your time. You got to find those things that you think are most actionable and most applicable to what you do, and you got to actually use them.
Well, I give you credit for looking for the B plus. I'm more like I jump in at a B minus, and a lot of times C plus. A lot of times my marketing team or whoever is gonna be like, "Come on, Damon, let's put a little more thought into this." But to me, it's all about taking action, like you said. And I think too many people struggle with that. There's that old great quote, better done than perfect. It's so true. And a lot of times you can iterate on things, especially now, but you don't want to wrap yourself up into always trying to make everything perfect before you get it out there. So I think that's super important. And also I went from reading, 40, 50 books a year to reading a lot less than that. And then also rereading books, because I love reading, but rereading books, instead of trying to go through, again, a laundry list of new books, going back to the ones where I really thought were valuable, like Ryan Holiday's Obstacle or the Way, and learning some of the concepts and ideas there. So it's less about how many books you can read or how many podcasts you can listen to, but like what we're talking about, Bill, what can we apply and actually use to make us better in one way or the other?
Yeah, it's all about that gradual incremental improvement, right? So like I like the fact that you're like, I rush in there at a C plus. Well, the thing is, if you get the C plus, next time you're going to get the B minus, right? Yeah. And it's the whole idea that, like, if you can get 1% better by just doing the thing and then doing the thing again and then doing the thing again, right? It creates that lifelong learning process, and it allows you to learn these skills on the fly. It allows you to adapt and change over time. And I guarantee, the first podcast you ever did was not as good as like the 300th podcast you did, right? The first YouTube video I ever put out, I you turn it on, the audio's like, you can't hear anything anybody's saying. The background's faded, right? I'm slamming my hands on the desk and you can hear it, And, by the time you get to video 100, it's a smooth sailing operation, crisp, and you got the mic situation figured out and the background situation figured out, and you have, what kind of intro music you're going to use. But that stuff doesn't happen overnight, right? And we're so used to seeing these people on the internet that, are good at their craft, right? And they have a lot of help. They have big teams, they have, resources. And we think that we need to get to that level on day one, when a lot of the times we got to realize that life's about learning. It's about trial and error, and it's a process.
Well, I went on a walk with a guy yesterday, and we were talking about that. And can't remember the exact analogy, but he talked about how there's really no such thing as a hack. A lot of times people are always looking for hacks, and if you just did the work, it would actually take you less time to get something done. And he gave this great story about a bunch of people or animals doing a race. And so this one animal would stop and try to build this wall to trick everybody else. But everybody was jumping over the wall. And at the end of the day, he was missing out and losing every time, even though he was far ahead at the beginning. So there's really I don't believe there's a hack for any of this stuff. And some of those people you see on Instagram that say, you make $80,000 a month. First of all, who knows if that's even true? But it takes work and effort. The first podcast I was ever a guest on, I looked like I was going to throw up. I was so scared and so nervous. But you know what you do? You go through it, you do your best, and then you got to be open to receive feedback. I think receiving feedback is so critical in today's day and age. A lot of people talk about giving feedback, but how do you receive feedback? And after it, I would send it to somebody on my team and I'd say, just give me some honest feedback on what I could do better. And you can get incrementally better. So feedback is a fuel for learning, but none of it really matters if you don't just get out there, get out of your comfort zone. Who really cares, right? I mean, people care too much about them, what other people think. Who really cares? Do the best you can do and get better step by step by step. But you can't go from A to Z. You can't go from being the first time you get on stage as a keynote speaker to being a phenomenal keynote speaker. If you want to be a keynote speaker, take every event possible. Do the Chamber of Commerce, do your third grade kids class, get on podcasts, talk, get out there and speak as much as possible, and just keep refining over time.
So one of the things I really clung to there was the idea of how you receive feedback, right? And what I think a lot of people struggle with about feedback is that emotional child that's within you, right? I did something bad, or this can't be right, I need it my way. That initial gut feeling that many of us have. And what I've found as I've matured, as I've aged, as I've gone on and done different stuff, is what I need to do with feedback is I need to sit in it, right? So what I like to do is take that feedback and sleep on it for a night or two, and then decide if that feedback is worth taking, right? Because I think feedback's a double-edged sword, because on one hand, it's the most helpful guiding piece of information you can get, because it's somebody else's insight to things that you might not see in yourself. And then the other thing is that there are people out there that, sometimes you really shouldn't take their feedback, right? If you took their feedback, you'd be worse off. And what I think the best way to handle feedback is to really sit in it, right? Take time. Don't have that, childish, well, I like this because, blah, 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 and this is going to be better. Instead, sit back and go, you know what? I got to think about that. And then actually think about it, assess it, go through what happens if I take option A versus option B, route C versus route D, right? And actually think critically about the feedback you received, and you'll be a better recipient of feedback for doing that.
100%. First thing I think it's important, for your listeners and all of us to think about is feedback. What is it? It's really just data. It doesn't mean the data is 100% accurate. And so, but it's data. And when you have more data, just like getting back to ChatGPT with all the trillions of data that's in it, at the end of the day, it helps you make better decisions and learn and grow. It doesn't mean you have to apply every single thing that people tell you. But just to double down on what you said, especially if you're leading a team, I've got about 100 people that work for me at Learnit. I welcome feedback. If I didn't, it would be a yes culture where everybody thought that they had to just agree with me all the time. And that stunts everybody's growth, especially mine. And it's been a challenge, early on in my career. If somebody would come to me and say, "Hey, Damon, I think we could have done this differently or better," I would get tense. I would
Yeah.
want to fight back. But I've learned over time, what's the use of that? And so many times when I stopped thinking in my head that the first answer is like, "No, we can't do it that way," and Bill, you just let people talk and hear what they
Mhm.
have to say. It's surprising how many times at the end of that, if you're humble enough to admit it, you're like, "Hey, that's a great point. Maybe we should do it that way." And as a leader, who cares where the idea comes from? I think if you're a great leader, you want it to come from your team, not your own ideas. So if you can get ideas from other people through the feedback that they're sharing, and you can implement those ideas, then you're going to get ideas and feedback bubbling up from everywhere, and you're going to develop a learning culture where
Mhm.
people are trying things and they're not afraid to fail, and they're giving peer-to-peer feedback with each other. And that's when I think your culture is thriving. But it's got to start at the top. It's got to start with this learning mentality we're talking about, being open to receiving feedback. And yeah, I know people very close to me who I mentor sometimes, where they'll get feedback from a specific individual and they just won't let it go. It'll
Mhm.
it'll, it'll drive them nuts and upset them. And I'll say sometimes you got to consider the source where it's coming from, and
Yeah.
don't react. Just kind of listen, but you have to be open to it, because if you're not, you're going to not only hurt yourself personally, but an organization, especially if you're a leader.
So I would say that the ones that irk you the most are sometimes some of the most important pieces of criticism you will receive in your life. And I have a perfect example of this. So about 6, 7, 8 months ago, I sat down with a VC and I was talking to him. I'm like, yeah, Racklify is going to make all this money. We're going to sell subscriptions, and we're going to do this thing with the subscriptions and that thing with the subscription. The guy paused and he said, I love the product. I love everything that you guys are doing, but I hate the way you guys are monetizing this. I said, well, what do you mean you don't like the way we're monetizing this? Blah, 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 blah. And the guy was like, listen, just think about this overnight. Like eBay did a similar thing with the subscriptions, right? All these companies do a similar thing with the subscriptions, and it limits their growth. And if you're a subscription based model, it's good for cash flow up front, but you're always going to be a $2 million business. And I went home that night, went to sleep in my bed. I woke up the next morning and I went, he's right. If I just sell a subscription, that's one price point that only fits, and once people buy that, there's only so much of a market share and the business caps out and it loses scalability. What I have to do is implement a different type of monetization that allows people to get more value, congruent with what they are doing. And it changed my entire thinking about how we monetize the company. Right. And if I would have sat there and just thought, oh, well, subscription based businesses, that's how everybody does this. And, subscription's the only way, I would have never come to the, realization that there's other ways to monetize a business. And maybe I should zig while everyone else zags.
And what I think you should do with that as well is you should send that gentleman from the VC a note thanking him,
I did.
and saying, "And here's how I implemented. Here's what I'm thinking through." And people love that. I mean,
Yeah.
because it's showing. Because what you did right there is, first, you didn't get defensive when somebody told you that your idea wasn't perfect. So you kind of reflected on it. You're like, okay. And then you thought and like, hey, this is right. Now I'm going to have to pivot a little bit from this. And I mean, that's perfect
Yeah.
example of how to receive feedback and learn and continue to grow. And that's why it's so important to be able to get out of your own bubble and meet different people and ask questions, right? And get different perspectives, especially if you're meeting with somebody like that VC gentleman who's probably got a ton of experience and has seen firsthand that you could have spent years probably on your own trying to figure that out and pay the dummy tax for it,
Yeah.
where you got it wrong, but you were able to expedite that by asking questions and being open.
Well, see, that's the key there is that it was one of those moments, like you said, that was like jarring. It was one of those moments where you heard the feedback and immediately you were like, no, no,
Yeah.
no, no, not doing that. And then all night, it just in my head, boom, 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 right? Just the words were echoing. And By the time I woke up in the morning, I had a different outlook on life. But
it shows that you're humble enough to pivot.
yeah.
What was there's another great saying that when the facts change, I change my, if the facts change, I change my opinion. What do you do? A know-it-all, I wrote a book called Learn-It-All Leader, Learn-It-Alls versus Know-It-All. A know-it-all would say, no, this guy is wrong. I don't care what he's saying. And you put your stick in the ground and you go there. What you did is you said, all right, this guy's got a great idea. Let's maybe I'm not perfect on this. Let's pivot or not even pivot, but let's just add in another model of payment.
Yeah, but I think that's a big one, is that there's these learning opportunities all around us. And sometimes they're disguised as these little tiny moments. But these little tiny moments can have major ripple effects if we just take the opportunities to learn that are in front of us, right? Like maybe you have an opportunity to go have dinner with somebody who might change the outlook you have on your business or your life, right? Maybe you have the opportunity to go to an event. You're tired, right? But that event, you could meet somebody that dramatically alters your life or your business, right? And it's about taking these smaller opportunities that can be learning opportunities and using them as such.
Yeah, absolutely. I look at it like my wife loves going to these events that I don't really want to go to, but sometimes I have to go with her. So if you go, you might as well make the best out of it.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've gotten a lot better at is just having conversations with people I don't know in areas that I'm unfamiliar with, and just being, Bill, I think that one of the themes of what we haven't even said yet, but is curiosity, just being curious, asking questions. And for instance, I don't know a lot about crypto. So the other night we were at some party and I just asked this guy, I said, hey, you're a VC guy at a crypto company. Share with me a little bit more, and I just think it makes you more interesting. I mean, you become more interested in what people else out there have to say. It broadens your viewpoint of the world. And it's just better than sitting in a corner and being pissed that you're at some event that you don't want to be at. Make the best out of it. And like you said, you find these little learning moments all over the place. Take advantage of them. Be open to them.
Yeah, one of the things with curiosity I think is really important is that when you find something that you're curious about, then you explore it, right? So like a perfect example of this is one of my favorite things to do is the rabbit hole, right? Mm-hmm. So what happens is, you start at the tip of the iceberg and you work your way down. And I find these like little fixations I have throughout my life that last like 1 to 3 months.
I like how it's 1 to 3 months.
Yeah, it's always 1 to 3 months. After like 3 months, it's like, okay, I know enough about the Roman Empire now.
That's cool that you find those things.
Yeah, but you find these things where it's like, you find one topic or one video that interests you, and then you like see something in that video that like captures your eye, and you go to that thing. And like these cycles, if you just follow the things that you are interested in within the things you're currently doing, naturally seem to appear in life. It's amazing how they like rear their head. And if you take that moment of curiosity, the spark of curiosity, and you follow it, you can learn a lot of different things.
Yeah, I had this one neuroscientist on my show, and I think he brought up a really great point. He said, you can accelerate learning by trying to learn things that you're interested in and passionate about. It's very difficult to learn about something if you have no interest. And I think it's great to go down the rabbit hole, if you're interested in the Roman Empire. I don't know how you don't have to monetize everything. No. Getting back to somebody who's looking for a career, if you can find something that you're really interested in and want to learn more about, you're going to be able to accelerate that learning compared to taking a job because you feel like it's the next best thing on your on your resume, but it's something you hate. So I think it's important to figure out what your strengths are or what you're passionate about that you could be good at and continue to learn down that path.
Yeah, well, there's a parable that I think about like it's the man who walks further, right? The man who likes to walk and enjoys it, or the man who's forced to walk, right? Ultimately, it's always the man who likes to walk. Right. And it's like that with anything in life is if you find something that you enjoy, that you like, that captivates you, I call it a sphere of genius, right? It's something that you're uniquely positioned to succeed at because you're interested in it. You want to be involved in it. You're driven by it. And that gives you an advantage over the other billion people on the planet because it's uniquely fitted to you.
But you got to be careful in the same sense. It's like, look, I would love to be the lead singer of Guns N' Roses, but I can't sing at all. right?
Yeah.
So as passionate as interested I am, it's never going to put my kids through college. So you got to keep that in mind as well. You got to have, it's like Jim Collins, his hedgehog, right? You got to be, it's got to be something that you can be good at, and that you can also, when it comes to career, monetize.
Right. Yeah. And that's why people have hobbies, and that's why people have careers.
Maybe I could be a singer at the what do you call it? The no name bar down the street.
Yeah. No name down the bar down the street. The cover band. You can live all your dreams out at,
Yeah.
That's okay too, right? Like there's tons of people that like to paint, but they're not artists, and they own that craft for 70 years. Right. So, it's important to find that intersection if you're going to try to monetize it. But
very good point. Very good point. Find that intersection. Yeah. And it's great to have hobbies. Yeah. It's great to have hobbies, because I think that if you're just so dedicated and focused to one thing, I love that book Range by David Epstein, where it's talk about, being more of a generalist and going out and seeing things and doing things and exploring, being curious. Because if as much as I love working, I love Learnit and all the work I do. But if I didn't spend any time really learning how to be a better parent or having some of these hobbies, whether it's music or whatever else, I think I wouldn't be as good at my job, because I think I'd be a little bit more burnt out that way.
I see you have a bookshelf behind you. And one of my absolute favorite things about having a bookshelf in an office is the amount of times I've walked out of the office, came back in, and I've seen somebody staring intently at my bookshelf and seeing what I'm reading, what I've read, what my interests are is amazing. And I was wondering if you had any similar experiences.
That's a good question. And the reason why I have this bookshelf here in my office is because my wife wanted more space for the kids at home for their Paw Patrol toys. So I had to bring most of my books here. No, just kidding. I love it when people are staring at my bookshelf. And I love giving away books. You could take whatever ones you want. As far as the impact that it's had, I'm trying to think off the top of my head if there's one specific book that's made a huge difference that's sitting behind me. I can't think of it right now. I really like Stephen M.R. Covey's book on Trust and Inspire. That's been a huge help for me to make sure that I'm not leading with the command and control, and more about giving people the autonomy to work and inspiring them to be their best. But I love it when somebody's looking at my bookshelf and they're saying, "Hey, have you ever read this book?" or "Have you ever read that?" And there's another great quote about you shouldn't be judged by the books you've read on your bookshelf, but by the books you haven't read yet. That you have out there. So I love having those conversations if people stop by my house or I have many more books or here, and just kind of talking through. And a lot of times it just helps me remember why I bought the book in the first place. Maybe I heard about it on a podcast, or somebody recommended it to me, but it helps prompt why I bought it. And I can either share that with them and give them that book, or maybe it just helps me pick that book up and actually read it if I haven't read it yet. So I hope that answers your question.
I think it's really important for bonding and learning, right? Yeah. Because if you have a shared book or a shared interest, you can talk about it, right? If you have a shared interest, but somebody didn't read this book, like you said, you can give it away, you can recommend it, and it allows you to collaboratively learn ideas off each other. I think the bookshelf is like such a physical manifestation of everything we talked about. And I felt like I had to mention it while I see it behind you. For those that are, looking at audio only, there's a bookshelf behind them.
Yeah. And so to answer, so for instance, I recently read Keith Ferrazzi's book, Never Lead Alone, his newest book, Never Lead Alone. And I loved it. And a lot of it was about teamship. And so what we're doing now is we're doing a book club internally at Learnit, because we're a learning organization. So we need to roll up our sleeves and actually do the work. Do the work. And so that right there, that's a shared experience that we're all kind of going through the book together, getting together every once in a while and talking about not only what we learned, but how we could apply his shifts in the book, either personally or professionally. And when you do that and you have these shared experiences, it helps with the retention of the learning, especially when you teach it back to somebody else.
Yeah, and you have other people to hold you accountable.
100%, so important.
Things you've talked about. Yeah. Well, anyhow, we're getting near the end here, so I want to give you a couple of minutes to talk about what you're up to, what you guys do at Learnit, and any parting thoughts you have.
So what I do at Learnit, I'm the CEO of Learnit. We're a live learning platform. Been around 30 years. And what we do is we are a B2B company that teaches our customers how to upskill in the top in-demand skills. So everything from what we talked about today, from creative problem solving. We teach skills on how to become a new manager. We all know that that's one of the most difficult things, to go from individual contributor to a manager. And so we give them the tools and the resources they need to be successful in those areas. And we do them through live in-person training and a lot of Zoom classes. So that's really what Learnit does. Besides that, I wrote a book called The Learn It All Leader. Kind of talks about the traits I think are most important to be a leader. And I've got a podcast I really enjoy called the Learn It All Podcast.
Awesome. Yeah, so I'll include some of those links down in the bio for anybody who wants to check them out. I really appreciated having you on. I think there was a lot of interesting insights there, and I really enjoyed some of the stories we were able to share. So guys, thank you so much for checking out this episode of Disruptive Minds. We're coming at you every week with new content. Check out the YouTube channel, check out the Apple Podcasts, Spotify, any place you can find podcasts.